I'm Jason Hager, and this is Marketing Notes for Entrepreneurs from Grayleaf Media, where impact-driven leaders use trust, clarity, and strategy to turn good work into sustainable growth. We just wrapped up a 10-episode series on why your ICP might be alive. That series was about who you're actually talking to. Today, we're picking up the next question. Once you know who you're talking to, how do you actually talk to them? Especially when you're talking to several different people at once. There's a restaurant that's been on the same corner for longer than anyone who eats there can remember. The sign out front bears the same name since the day it opened. A family name. Below it, the hours, hand-painted once, touched up a few times since, never changed. The fragrance rises to meet you as you walk through the door. Garlic, olive oil, Italian herbs, and a hint of something slow-simmered that's been on the burner since long before the lunch rush. The kind of aroma that instantly triggers fond memories, recent and distant, before your first step lands inside. The tables are in good condition, but bear the wear and marks from decades of mugs, glasses, and dishes having been served to countless patrons over the years. The kind of patina that makes it feel lived in, like this place is the real deal. The menu features dishes that the owner's great-great-grandmother brought with her from the old country. You won't find these recipes in any cookbook. These are recipes she carried in her head, passed down to her the old-fashioned way, written down later so they wouldn't be lost to time. The favorite dishes are the same today as they were then. Because how do you improve on perfection? Some new things have been added over the years. A seasonal dish, a reflection of fresh, locally available ingredients. But they belong to the same expression of good taste. The same family of flavor combinations. If you were to put them in the original recipe book, they wouldn't feel out of place. The room is full on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons. They can barely keep up with the weekday lunch rush orders. Not to say that there isn't room for growth, but business is good. Not because of a campaign, because of the food, and because somebody told them to come. That last part matters more than it sounds. Because the family doesn't just run the restaurant. They carry it with them. The uncle at a neighborhood gathering. The cousin out with friends on a Saturday. Each of them is a door into the same room. A different door for a different crowd, opened a different way. Who's doing the telling, and how they tell it, and who they're telling it to? That's the whole conversation we're about to have. This is episode 19, Bringing People to the Family Table. Let's talk about why the most consistent brands aren't the ones that sound identical everywhere. They're the ones that know exactly what's allowed to change. Let's start with the table itself. The restaurant doesn't survive 3 generations on charm alone. It survives on the soul of the business, the food, the company, and the service, maintained at a reliable high level for decades. That soul lives in the kitchen, in the choices made before anyone opens their mouth to tell anyone else about the place. I'm going to call it the recipe. not because it's about ingredients, but because it's the thing that has to be followed faithfully in every room by everyone who carries the name. This means that before you can understand how the uncle and the cousin can sound so completely different from each other without either of them being wrong, you have to understand what they're both protecting without knowing they're protecting it. Most businesses think about channel voice as a messaging problem. How do we sound on LinkedIn? What's our tone in email? How casual is too casual on social? Those are good to consider, but they're downstream of the real question. What's actually in the recipe? What's so fundamentally true about what you do? So essential to what someone gets when they sit down at your table, that no conversation about your business can afford to contradict it. That's what has to stay constant. Everything else is delivery. Now, let's talk about the uncle. He's been going to this restaurant his whole life, not because he has to, because it's his family's. There's a difference between loyalty and ownership. What he feels is something closer to the second one. When he talks about the place, he doesn't pitch it. He inhabits it. He'll be at a neighborhood event, in conversation with someone he half knows, someone a little outside his usual circle, someone whose opinion of the restaurant could actually open a new table. And he'll bring it up the way you bring up something you're proud of without wanting to seem like you're proud of it. Casual. Assured. He lets the other person arrive at interest on their own. He uses the people around him as proof without naming them as proof. He says things like, "My friend Maria's been going there every Sunday for 20 years. She brings her daughter now." That's not a testimonial. That's a portrait. It does more work than a 5-star review because the listener can picture Maria. They can picture themselves becoming someone who also goes every Sunday. The uncle's delivery is slow, rich with reference. It doesn't rush toward a close because it doesn't need to. His job isn't to convince. It's to draw in. To make the restaurant feel like something that already exists in the listener's world, waiting to be discovered. The point I want you to notice is that he isn't just maintaining relationships with people who already come in. He's expanding the radius of who feels like the restaurant belongs to them. Gradually, naturally, through the specific kind of social currency you can only spend when people already trust you. And the restaurant earns the table because he puts his own credibility behind it first. Now, the cousin. His version looks almost nothing like the uncle's. Same restaurant, same family. Completely different conversation. His crowd is his own age, his own world. People who've heard him mention the place but never had a reason to go. Some of them have been there once, on a night he dragged them out. Most haven't been back since, for no reason in particular. Life, laziness, the usual. He doesn't talk about the restaurant the way the uncle does. He doesn't have 30 years of neighborhood credibility to lend it. What he has is something different. The specific social permission that only comes from being someone's actual peer. The right to be unreasonable. so he uses it. There's a version of this that lives in the group chat. A photo of the family recipe lasagna. You still haven't been here. What is actually wrong with you? Not a question. And then, in the same breath, seriously though, it's the best thing you'll eat this month. I'm not wrong about this. Shame and invitation, delivered back to back. Only possible from someone who knows you well enough to get away with both. The delivery is fast, irreverent. It doesn't explain, it assumes. It assumes you should already know about this place. That not knowing is some kind of personal failure. That showing up there with him is the obvious correction. And somehow that lands better than a careful pitch would. Because it's not a pitch at all. It's a dare from someone you trust. This means the cousin isn't drawing in the way the uncle does. He's pulling. With the specific kind of force that only works between people who already have enough shared understanding to absorb it. Same restaurant, same recipe underneath it all. A completely different door. Here's where it breaks. The mistake most businesses make is trying to make the uncle and the cousin sound too much like the same person. It comes from a reasonable instinct. Brand consistency. Unified voice. Everyone on message. And those things matter, but they're often applied at the wrong level. When you enforce consistency at the level of tone and phrasing, rather than at the level of what's actually true about what you do, you end up with something that sounds a bit like, well, nobody in particular. Imagine the uncle using the cousin's energy and snark at a neighborhood dinner. The fast delivery, the irreverence, the semi-aggressive, "What's wrong with you? You still haven't been there." His crowd didn't stick around for that kind of conversation. They listened for the slow story, the familiar reference, the feeling that this place has been part of the neighborhood as long as any of them have. The cousin's move would feel performed, off, like someone trying too hard. Now flip it around. Imagine the cousin trying the uncle's approach with his friends. The slow build-up, the patient, assured tone, the references they don't have context for. His crowd would lose interest before he finished his second sentence. They need a reason to care, fast, delivered like it's coming from a friend, not a host. I've seen both of these fail. Managing content across multiple channels, I watched a team enforce a uniform voice everywhere. It read flat on most channels. Accurate, yes, but connecting with almost no one. And I've watched the opposite happen as well. A channel that drifted so far that customers who encountered both versions in the same week didn't recognize them as the same company. Both failures came from the same place. Not knowing what was actually supposed to stay constant. The recipe has to be the same. The way it gets described doesn't. Confuse those two things, and every channel starts sounding wrong. Let me show you what this looks like when a real company runs it. MailChimp started as a side project inside a web design agency. For a long time, it was just a useful tool, something the team built to solve a real problem for their clients. Eventually, it became its own thing, built specifically for small business owners and entrepreneurs who needed to send professional email without needing a marketing department to do it. They grew it for 2 decades without taking a dollar of outside investment. In 2021, Intuit acquired them for $12 billion. And that number matters because Intuit wasn't just buying software. They were buying trust, habit, reputation, and a relationship with millions of small businesses. For most of their life as a company, MailChimp ran 3 very different rooms simultaneously. In their marketing and brand presence, they were famously quirky. Their mascot, a chimpanzee in a mail carrier hat, showed up everywhere. The copy was irreverent, self-aware, a little absurdist. They once built an entire advertising campaign around deliberately mispronouncing their own name. Variations that sounded almost right, but weren't. Each one the subject of its own ad. It was cousin energy, fully committed. Fast, slightly absurd, built for the audience that would laugh, remember it, and repeat it to someone else. Inside the product, the voice shifted completely. Their educational content, email marketing guides, tutorials, practical resources for small business owners learning to communicate with their customers, was serious, clear, and genuinely useful. Patient in a way the marketing never was. The kind of content you'd bookmark and return to, not because it was entertaining, but because it actually made you better at what you were trying to do. That was the meal, the table itself. And in how they talked about the company. In press, in industry conversations, in the way they presented what they were building. They were measured and credible. A serious business that happened to have a playful face. 3 rooms. Cousin energy in marketing. The full meal in the product. Something closer to the uncle's quiet assurance in how they carried the company's reputation. The recipe that held all 3 together. Professional email marketing should be accessible to any small business owner, regardless of budget or background. That promise showed up as playfulness in one room, practical education in another, and quiet confidence in a third. Nobody who encountered MailChimp in any of those rooms would mistake them for someone else. Not because all 3 sounded alike, but because all 3 protected the same thing. And when Intuit paid $12 billion for what they built, they weren't buying the product. They were buying the recipe. 2 decades of consistent delivery across every room to an audience that trusted them completely. That's what gets built when the recipe is right and the rooms are right. Accurate enough to be the same kitchen. Flexible enough to be the right meal for the room you're in. Here's how to know if you've got it right. Think about the different places your business shows up. Social media, email, sales conversations. Pick 2 that feel the most different from each other. Strip away the platform. Strip away the labels. And look at what's actually there. The heart of what's on the page, or the core of what's coming out of your mouth in that room. The first question: could someone who already knows your business recognize the same kitchen underneath your LinkedIn posts and your sales conversations? Not the same tone, not the same phrasing, the same recipe. Does it taste familiar? Because if not, you're not looking at a delivery problem. You're looking at a recipe problem. Second question: if one of your best customers stumbled into a channel where they'd never encountered your brand before, a different platform, a different context entirely, would they feel at home? The regulars at this restaurant don't expect Friday dinner to feel like Tuesday lunch, but they expect the lasagna to taste like the lasagna. That's the test. The third question is the hardest. Does each room you're showing up in feel like it was made for the people in that room specifically? Not just adapted for them, but made for them. People can feel when a conversation belongs in the room they're standing in. They can also feel when someone brought a conversation from somewhere else and tried to make it fit. The restaurant doesn't adjust the recipe for the lunch crowd. It adjusts the pace, the portion, the energy of the room. The recipe is the recipe. If you can answer all three of those questions honestly and the answers hold, the recipe is working. The rooms are right. The family is telling the story well. And that's good news for you. If one of those questions caught you, if something snagged on the way through, that's the one to follow. Not to fix immediately, but to sit with long enough to understand what it's actually telling you about what's happening in the kitchen. Because the fixes that last don't start with the voice. They start with getting honest about what the recipe actually is, and making sure everything downstream is protecting it. One question before you close this out. If you looked at every place your business shows up, every channel, every conversation, every version of the stories someone might tell about what you do, would you recognize the same table underneath all of it? Not the same tone or the same phrasing, the same thing that's true underneath everything that no version of the story is allowed to contradict. If you can answer that clearly, the delivery becomes much easier. If you can't, that's where to start. If today raised questions about whether your brand has a clear enough recipe, whether what's supposed to stay constant actually does across the rooms your business shows up in, brand therapy is where to start. It's a diagnostic process designed to surface exactly that kind of misalignment before it compounds. grayleafmedia.com/diagnostic. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it with someone who's been struggling to figure out why their brand doesn't feel consistent, even when they've been trying to make it that way. A review wherever you listen also goes a long way toward helping this show find the people it's built for. Next time, we step behind the host stand and into the kitchen. Same restaurant, same family. But the conversation shifts from how you bring people to the table to how you actually run one. Until then, figure out what's in the recipe. The rest of the conversation follows from there.